Good morning, America. How are you? How are you, America? As for me, I'm having a little bit of a self-care day today, just wearing my scrubs. I just woke up from a nap, as a matter of fact, and I'm all out of cigarettes. That's a drag. But anyway, that's not important. What's important is I had a dream just now, and I want to tell you all about this dream that I just had. And it was a happy dream. It wasn't a nightmare by any means. It was a happy dream. So in the dream, it turns out that I was the lucky winner of a clearinghouse jackpot. It was like a random long story short, I was the winner of this winning golden ticket to a all inclusive 7 day trip to Fiji. So I won this. It was a prize. That was the dream I was having. And in the dream, I was in this airplane on my way to Fiji. A really nice 777, the 777, brand new 777, Boeing 777, and I'm sitting in this airplane, and I got this ticket, and I'm going to Fiji. And as it turns out, is in the dream, it was a charter airline, and all 300 people in this airplane, they're all on their way to see Jeff Probst because it's the Jeff Probst convention down in Fiji. You understand? So it's a happy environment. They're exchanging, in the dream, we're exchanging family photos, we're getting to know each other, we're talking about each other's contacts, learning about each other's different cultures and different ways of life and stuff like that. And we're just flying and cruising we're flying in this jet airplane to Fiji, Jeff Probst convention, like I said. So in the dream, I cut from the cabin where the passengers were, and then in my dream, I ended up in the cockpit. All right, and this is where it gets interesting for a guy like me, because in the cockpit were two Navy aviators. That's what they call Navy aviators. And for those of you who don't know, Navy aviators claim to be better than pilots, and they claim to be better than pilots, and I wouldn't argue with that. I wouldn't argue with that at all. But anyway, the first guy's name is Big Dick McGillicuddy, all right, and he's a Navy aviator, and he's got his stuff dialed in. He's locked in. He knows his stuff. And sitting next to Big Dick McGillicuddy is Commander Contreras, and Commander Contreras has a hard name to pronounce. Commander Contreras is Hispanic, so people like Big Dick McGillicuddy over there, they have a hard time saying Contreras properly, so they just refer to him as CC. Commander Contreras. So anyway, CC and Dick, they're flying this airplane. They're checking the gauges. It's on autopilot. They're coking and joking. They're enjoying each other's company. It's a beautiful day. They're on their way to Fiji, dropping all these happy passengers off to the Jeff Probst convention. Suddenly, the silence is broken. Suddenly, and without warning, the cabin is breached by 1,000 hijackers. Can you believe that? 1,000 hijackers. Now, mind you, they're not professionals and they're not armed, but there's so many of them that they don't need guns. They're outnumbered. So Cece and Dick, they look at each other and they understand what's going on, and they try to reason with these hijackers. And hijackers, they're not very clear. They don't state their intentions, and they talk in circles and they speak in circular logic. And as I said, there's 1,000 of these hijackers inside the cabin. And it's just a headache. And naturally, being Navy aviators, Dick and Cece, they try to reason with these people. They look at each other and they say, "What's going on? Who's in charge here?" And nobody could be in charge because all 1,000 of them thought they were all in charge, and it was just pandemonium in the cockpit. Meanwhile, as you can imagine, the aircraft is in peril. So, as I say, it was pandemonium in the cockpit, right? And Dick and Cece, they're getting frustrated because it's just too much. And so Dick, he gets frustrated in a fit of, he loses his cool a little bit. Dick looks over at Cece and says, "Cece, fuck this noise, man." And then Cece looks back over at Dick, and Cece says, "Yeah, this trip is nowhere, man." So what do? They put their helmets back on. They strap into their ejection seats, right? They're getting ready to eject, and right before they pull the lever, right before they eject, CC looks Dick right in the eye and he goes, "Keep it real, Dogg." All right. The Dick hears that he's taken aback. Dick is, because he's made aware of the gravity of the situation. Okay, so in response to that, so Dick, he turns back to Cece and he looks Cece in the eye and he says, "Fucking A, Bubba." And in that moment, he pulls that hammer and then Cece pulls this. They fucking eject out of that fucking airplane. Just like that, Cece and Dick are gone. But he got 1,000 hijackers wandering around talking in circles in the cockpit, and the airplane's going down. Airplane's going down. Dick and Cece are ejected. They're gonzo, man. It's just 1,000 hijackers in this cockpit. kind of oblivious to the situation. There are all the passengers in the back. They're still coking and joking, thinking about meeting Jeff Probst, thinking about Fiji. Next thing you know, long story short, metaphysical mountain of manure appears from out of nowhere. And in my dream, this airplane nosedives right smack into that metaphysical mountain of manure. Cockpit first. It is stuck in there. Like, this is the mountain of manure. Here's the airplane. The tail section is still sticking up, and the nose is submerged in this mountain of manure. All right, long story short, people back in coach, passengers, they all look at each other and say, "Well, that was an abrupt stop." They all they pull out they realize that happened. They realize that the plane crashed into a metaphysical mountain of manure. Long story short, all the passengers in the plane, they're safe. Not so much for the 1,000 hijackers, though. They were in the nose of the plane. And it turns out the 1,000 hijackers are neck deep in manure at this time. They're struggling and scrambling, and their suits are dirty, and their ties are messed up, and their shiny shoes are all full of manure. And as the stewardesses, not the stewardesses, the flight attendants, they're exiting the passengers out, and they're all in an orderly fashion. And as the passengers exit the airplane in an orderly fashion, they look down at these people, the hijackers, who are begging for their help, begging for help, begging for help. The hijackers, because they're up to their necks in their own shit. The moral to the story is, it's time for the hijackers to pick up their own shovels and dig themselves out of their own shit. That's the dream I had. The dream I had is when everybody ignores the fucking hijackers and just treats them like the children that they are, and just walks off the airplane and exits it, and happily ever after. Don't give these hijackers any more attention, people. That's the moral to the dream that I had. But anyway, I don't want to get preachy, so I'm going to sign off now. Thank you for sharing that with me, America.